On the morning of January 24, 2026, a 37-year-old Minneapolis resident named Alex Jeffrey Pretti was shot and killed by U.S. Border Patrol agents during a federal immigration enforcement operation in the city's South Side. A dramatic and controversial event that has fueled protests and raised questions about federal law enforcement tactics. Who was Alex Pretti? Alex Jeffrey Pretti was a registered nurse working in the intensive care unit at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs healthcare system. He was known by family, friends, and colleagues as a compassionate caregiver who cared deeply about people and his community. He had no serious criminal record beyond minor traffic infractions and was a licensed, lawful gun owner. Colleagues from the VA hospital described him as devoted to helping veterans and involved in research, and family members say he had strong convictions about justice and community welfare. What happened on January 24th? According to an analysis of video footage by the New York Times, the encounter unfolded just after 9 a.m. local time near the intersection of 26th Street and Nicollet Avenue. Federal agents, including ICE and Border Patrol officers, were conducting an immigration enforcement operation as part of a broader crackdown that had drawn nationwide attention. The Times timeline and verified video evidence suggest that Pretti was initially holding a phone and appeared to be filming or observing agents when an altercation began. Footage shows him being pepper-sprayed and physically confronted by several agents before being wrestled to the ground. It wasn't until after he was pinned that agents can be seen yelling that he had a gun, suggesting they may not have known he was armed until he was already restrained. In the span of a few seconds, agents fired at least 10 shots, striking Pretti multiple times. Federal authorities later stated Pretti approached agents with a 9mm handgun during the altercation and resisted disarmament, prompting an agent to fire in what was described as self-defense. They said the handgun and 2 magazines were recovered at the scene. Conflicting accounts and video evidence. The NYT and other videos circulating online showed moments that conflict with the federal narrative, including footage of Pretti holding a phone with visible hands before the confrontation and being subdued on the ground before the shots were fired. Experts and analysts have noted that the sequence of events captured on video could contradict initial federal statements, fueling debate and scrutiny over law enforcement's version of events. Public reaction and protests. The shooting quickly sparked widespread protests in Minneapolis despite frigid temperatures. Demonstrators gathered at the scene, chanting for justice and calling for federal agents to leave the city. Some confrontations with law enforcement included tear gas and clashes between protesters and agents. Minnesota authorities reported crowds removing dumpsters to block streets and protesters holding signs reading "Justice for Alex Pretti." A memorial grew at the site of the shooting as night fell. Political and official responses. The incident drew reactions from political leaders at multiple levels. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz activated the state National Guard and sharply criticized federal enforcement efforts, accusing the federal government of excessive force and demanding transparent investigation. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey condemned the federal operation, saying the videos he reviewed showed agents pummeling Pretti before he was shot. Homeland Security officials defended the agents' actions, characterizing them as defensive responses during an ongoing immigration operation. Supporters of Pretti and civil liberties groups have rejected the federal narrative, questioning the use of force and demanding accountability. Legacy and broader context. Pretti's death was the second fatal shooting involving federal immigration agents in Minneapolis within weeks, following the killing of another Minnesota resident earlier this month, fueling public concern over immigration enforcement tactics and civil rights. Critics of the federal operation have described it as overly aggressive and potentially unconstitutional, with ongoing lawsuits and debates over federal authority and oversight of immigration enforcement. Timeline of events. 9:05 a.m. Agents encounter Pretti near Nicollet Avenue. Pretti appears to be observing or filming. A confrontation begins. Moments later, physical altercation ensues. Agents wrestle Pretti to the ground. Pepper spray and force are used. Within seconds, shots fired. At least 10 shots are fired by federal agents. Pretti is struck and later pronounced dead at the scene. Aftermath. Protests erupt. Hundreds gather, demanding justice and pushing back against federal enforcement. The killing of Alex Jeffrey Pretti in Minneapolis has become a flashpoint in the national debate over immigration enforcement, federal authority, and police use of force. Conflicting narratives between official statements and video evidence have intensified calls for accountability, transparency, and independent investigation as community members mourn and protest the loss of a man described by loved ones as compassionate and dedicated to helping others. Expanded details on the incident. Adult medical symbol. Who was Alex Pretti? Alex Jeffrey Pretti, 37, was an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs healthcare system. His family and colleagues describe him as a compassionate caregiver who cared deeply about helping others. He had no serious criminal history and was a lawful gun owner with a permit. Family members reported that Pretti had recently participated in protests against another federal shooting earlier in the month, that of Renee Good, and was upset about what was happening in his community. What happened on January 24, 2026? Magnifying glass tilted left. The confrontation. Federal immigration agents were conducting a large enforcement operation in Minneapolis. According to federal officials, Pretti approached Border Patrol officers with a handgun and resisted attempts to disarm him, which they say led to defensive shooting. However, bystander video and eyewitness accounts conflict with the federal narrative, showing Pretti initially holding a phone, filming agents, and helping a protester who was shoved to the ground before being pepper sprayed, tackled, and restrained by multiple agents. The videos show agents wrestling Pretti to the pavement. Only after he was pinned to the ground did shots ring out. In some clips shared widely, an agent appears to remove what could be Pretti's weapon from his waistband before other agents begin firing. Conflicting accounts and evidence. Firecracker. Federal version versus video evidence. Federal authorities claim Pretti was armed, resisted arrest, and officers fired in self-defense. Videos analyzed by reporters and shared online suggest Pretti was unarmed at the time agents wrestled him down and that a firearm, if present, may have been removed by an agent before the shooting began. Bystanders are heard on the videos yelling in shock and disbelief after the shots are fired. Public outcry and protests. Local and national response. Protesters gathered in freezing temperatures at the intersection where the shooting occurred, chanting slogans such as "Ice Out Now" and "Justice for Alex Pretti." People dragged dumpsters into the streets to block traffic and held vigils with flowers and candles for Pretti. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz activated the National Guard and strongly criticized the federal response, demanding more transparency and an end to aggressive immigration enforcement operations. In Chicago and elsewhere, leaders and activists voiced outrage and called for accountability, noting Pretti's role as a nurse and lack of violent history. Political reactions and national debate. Ballot box with ballot. Sharp political divide. Democratic figures such as Ilhan Omar and others condemned the shooting as an execution and accused federal agencies of unnecessary force while arguing for oversight and restraint. Republicans, including President Donald Trump and other federal officials, defended the agents' actions and criticized local leadership for creating a chaotic environment that emboldened resistance to law enforcement. Ongoing controversies and calls for investigation. Receipt. Demand for transparency. Local authorities and protest groups are demanding the release of all video footage, including any body-worn camera or surveillance footage. Civil rights advocates and organizations have called for independent investigations into the shooting and for accountability if wrongdoing is found. Debate continues over the use of federal immigration enforcement powers in U.S. cities, the training of agents, and the legal boundaries for use of force. Personal and community impact. Orange Heart remembering Alex Pretti. Friends and classmates have described Pretti as kind, helpful, and dedicated to his community, not someone prone to violence. Online discussions and eyewitness accounts portray Pretti attempting to help others at the scene and being overwhelmed by federal agents before being shot. Broader context. This event is not isolated. It occurred amid escalating federal immigration enforcement actions in Minneapolis, including a previous fatal shooting earlier in January and another non-fatal shooting. These incidents have intensified scrutiny over federal tactics, civil liberties, and calls for reform. Summary. The killing of Alex Pretti has ignited national controversy, sharp political division, community protests, and urgent calls for transparency and accountability. Conflicting narratives, one from federal law enforcement, another from video evidence and eyewitnesses, have fueled public distrust. Pretti's status as a well-liked ICU nurse and community member has made this case especially emotionally charged, leading to nationwide attention and debate over the future of law enforcement and immigration policy in the United States. Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General and the FBI have both opened inquiries into the incident, reviewing whether federal agents followed policy and law in using lethal force. Minnesota state authorities and local prosecutors are also examining evidence, including witness statements and video footage, to determine whether any criminal charges could be pursued. Civil rights groups have called for independent review by outside prosecutors to avoid conflicts of interest. So far, authorities have not released the full set of body-worn camera footage or surveillance video from businesses near the scene, which protesters and reporters have demanded. Transparency remains a major point of contention. Here's what investigative journalists, including those at the New York Times, Reuters, Associated Press, and others have highlighted in their timelines. Pre-confrontation moments. Several clips from bystanders show Pretti standing near the scene as federal agents detain or move a protester. He appears to be filming with a phone shortly before the incident escalates. Physical struggle begins. Agents move in quickly, using pepper spray and taking down Pretti to the ground. Some video shows his hands away from his waistband, raising questions about whether agents knew he was armed. Shots fired. After being pinned, shots are fired. Journalist-verified footage indicates at least 10 shots, with Pretti struck multiple times. The precise timing of when a weapon becomes visible on camera remains disputed among analysts. Aftermath. Footage after the shooting shows agents blocking access to the scene, paramedics arriving, and crowds forming in shock. Local news outlets have shared portions of this video, but not the full raw footage. Several journalists have described.
If you like the content, make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe button.